This episode of The Memory Palace is brought to you by Article. We are big fans of Article here at The Memory Palace. This room of the palace, the ballroom where I'm sitting right now, it's palatial, trust me, is lit beautifully by a legit beautiful lamp from Article. This stuff is of extraordinarily high quality. It is truly lovely furniture that's influenced by, mid-century modern and Scandinavian styles. I have a feeling you're really going to like it. If you've never checked it out before, summer and warmer weather is right around the corner here in the Northern Hemisphere. And they really have fantastic outdoor furniture. It's totally worth checking out. Go to article.com and take a look. The stuff looks great, and it is made with all these outdoor-friendly materials like teak and acacia wood and granite and galvanized steel and rattan. And it comes to you with a flat delivery fee of $49, regardless of what you're buying and how big the order is. So go to www.article.com/memorypalace and get $50 off your first purchase of $100 or more. That is www.article.com/memorypalace. Go check it out. The Memory Palace is brought to you by Rate Marketplace. If you're a homeowner, did you know it takes just minutes to see if you're eligible to save up to $4,000 a year? Rate Marketplace is a home financing engine that uses a fast and easy online process. With Rate Marketplace, you can drop the paperwork and in a few minutes get a custom mortgage solution from your phone or computer. If you want to get started and see your savings at ratemarketplace.com/memorypalace. That's ratemarketplace.com/memorypalace. They are an equal housing lender. MLS number 1137890. This is The Memory Palace. I'm Nate DiMeo. The world zigged and zigged and zigged and zigged again. Roger Babson zagged. That's how he did things. He was a maverick, or so he'd tell anyone who would listen. He didn't take no for an answer. He turned no's to yeses. He'd flip the script. He'd think outside of the box. Or whatever it was that people said back when he was cutting his teeth in the investment business at the turn of the last century. He was an iconoclast. He had been, he would tell anyone who would listen, since one day when he was a boy, and his sister drowned in the salty water of a tidal river that flowed into Ipswich Bay in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Her death gave him a purpose and a drive that led him to MIT and to Wall Street. And when he was a young man and a doctor told him that he had tuberculosis, that he should quit the business and move to the Southwest, where the desert air would revive him, Roger Babson zagged. Instead, he moved to the top of the Wellesley Hills, outside of Boston, theorizing that he didn't need drier air. He needed higher air. And he needed a lot of it. Everyone did. He founded a company that did statistical analysis of financial markets. It was the kind of Wall Street work one could do without actually working on Wall Street. His office was not only outside of New York, it was outside. He thought fresh air was good. And in winter, he and his employees would wear sweaters and layers and tap away at adding machines with freezing fingers that poked through holes they'd cut in their gloves. This was the late 1920s. And as this is, at least in part, a story of Wall Street, you know that the crash is coming. But here's the thing. So did Roger Babson. Throughout 1928 and the first half of 1929, when the markets kept climbing, Roger Babson was telling people to sell. It kept zigging and zigging up, and Roger Babson was one of the only, literally, one of maybe two people out there telling people to zag. There was going to be a crash. He told anyone who would listen. And then there was. And Roger Babson made a fortune. Because not only was he one of the few major investors who still had any money at all, the people who just lost all of theirs looked out over the landscape littered with bankrupt ziggers, and they saw one financial firm still standing. And so they looked to Babson as an oracle, as a Warren Buffett, or at least a Jim Cramer. And more money rolled in. Now, he didn't sell off before the crash merely because he was a zagger constitutionally. He sold off because he had a theory about the way the markets worked. And investors love a theory. It went like this. Babson had poured over decades worth of stock market data, and he saw a pattern that no one else had seen. The markets went up, and they went down. Others noticed that too, of course. Big spikes in the market were unsustainable, markets corrected, investors made adjustments. Market capitalism. But Roger Babson saw a different force at work. As a boy, he'd read Isaac Newton. He knew that there was an equal and opposite reaction for every action. So why wouldn't the rules that bring order to the physical world also apply to the financial world? Why wouldn't a rise in stock or commodity or real estate prices not eventually yield to a reactive decline? It was physics. It was the forces of gravity at work. Except that it wasn't. Because it's not the forces of gravity at work. Because his theory is terrible. But when people who just lost their shirts turned to just about the only guy with a shirt, they liked the sound of Newton. Newton was scientific. Roger Babson was a man of science, and they asked Roger Babson to handle their money. They bought his books. They paid to hear him speak. And though his theory as to why the markets work the way they do was totally wrong, it still kind of works. Because all of his charts and data sets and Newtonian physics, they basically all just add up to buy low and sell high. And so he made a lot of money, even if he had no idea why. And then it came time to spend it all. He had an enemy. And that enemy was gravity. Because it was gravity, he theorized, that caused his tuberculosis. He had this theory that was crazy about how heavy air settled into your lungs when you were at low altitudes. And it was gravity, he wrote in a 1948 essay titled Gravity, Our Enemy Number One, that held his sister beneath the surface of the water all those years ago. They said she was drowned, he wrote. But that was not true. She was unable to fight gravity, and he writes gravity with a capital G, like it was the name of a man or a god. He wrote she was unable to fight gravity, which came up and seized her like a dragon and brought her to the bottom. And that is an enemy worth fighting. So he poured millions into anti-gravity technologies. Millions upon millions. Year after year, decade after decade. He started a company, Invention Incorporated, that bought any patent that he thought might someday have something to do with freeing us from gravity's pull. And he saw billions to be made if he could do that. Billions in diseases cured, in cars elevated, in the fallen rescued before they hit the ground. And even though physicists told him over and over that this simply wasn't going to happen, that there was no way, no how, that gravity couldn't be stopped any more than death, he kept going. He zagged and zagged and zagged. Now, this is the part of the story where I'm supposed to tell you about how Roger Babson collapsed under the weight of his crackpot theories. About how maybe he winds up shouting his theories from the top of an apple cart on the corner of Wall Street and Broad, wild-eyed and bearded, while oblivious brokers and Brooks Brothers stream by. Or at the very least, I'm supposed to point out that despite all of his wealth, in all of his will, he would never be able to pull his sister out of the Annisquam River. I'm supposed to do that because what goes up must come down. That's the way physics works, and it's the way stories work. Stories have rules. They have morals. Don't play God. Don't fly too close to the sun. But Roger Babson doesn't come down. He lives a long and, by all accounts, happy life. He founds Babson College. He dies at the age of 92. He gets a fancy obituary in the Times that relegates his wrong-headed life's pursuit of the reversal of gravity to a discreet paragraph. Because that's not what people wanted to remember about Roger Babson. But it is what I want you to remember about Roger Babson. Because this story does have a moral, and it's this. If you have a lot of money, you can do whatever the you want.